excited what we have today. We have Iden coming in for you. Very happy with this model. Very happy with this video. If you stay tuned for just 1 second, we'll get right into it. Alright, so I'm pretty excited about this miniature. We're going to start off with her face. Now there's different options you can do with Iden. Obviously you can do her helmet on, you can do her pilot helmet on, and then you also can do her face like this. So I'm actually going to do her face, and then I'm also going to do her helmet on her stand to kind of show you, different ways of doing her face and then also the helmet as well. So she's a fun model. She's only a certain amount of colors, so I'm going to actually be showing you a lot more techniques involved with Iden because she doesn't have a lot of color schemes. I don't have to make this video 3 hours long to show you techniques. So this one's going to be not much as me talking, but more just showing exactly what I do with blending and how to highlight black and stuff like that. So it'll be fun. Okay, so the red part here, now I'm not going to highlight the clothing, right? So because the clothing doesn't give off much reflectiveness, I'm actually just going to be putting this base coat. So make sure you put a good base coat on this and make sure you stay in the lines. But I'm going to actually do her right arm strips here. And then you'll have to freehand a strip on her left and right arm. But you'll see me do that in just a second. So the strip here, you don't want it too long, but also there's a pocket on her right arm here in this configuration. You also don't want to go over the pocket either. Looking at pictures from Battlefront 2 and everything, the pocket was not stripped. There is a strip above the pocket, but because the pocket's tucked under the elbow pad, you won't see it. So it's gonna be that strip, and it's just a kind of follow the curvature of the arm as best as you can. It's not going to be perfect, but you can do the best you can here. And just short, straight lines, how you get a straight line. Don't try to do a full length line right off the bat. Short strokes, keep moving fast. Okay, and then here's the red of the helmet. Only the right side of the helmet was actually painted, other than decal. I'm going to put decals on them. I did freehand on my other one, but I'm just going to put decals on this one, but I won't do that in this video. So there are only technically 3 colors to a base coat for her. This red, you got her face, and then you have the black that it came from the primer. So like I said, her miniature doesn't have a lot of color to it, but you can still make it look very nice and very beautiful. So okay, so we're going to move on to the shading. There's only going to be one shade involved with this. Now you can shade the entire model black if you wanted to, but my priming was good enough that I really didn't feel like I needed to shade any black, so I didn't. But we're just going to shave her face in Argox. Normally, facial, flesh tones If you want like a wider skin, you'll do a flesh tone shade, but I want that kind of chocolate skin. And so in this case, I did an Argrox, and then I'll highlight up from there. So this is actually where most of the work's going to happen, is in the highlighting steps. I'm just going to go through the process. I have the same colors that I always do here with the black of the Eshin Gray, and then I'll have a Dawnstone as the top color. But the helmet is kind of important here. When you're trying to develop highlights for a helmet or anything armor like this, or Iden herself, you got to be very careful on how you do highlights. So I've noticed other people painting, Iden, and then her full body has all these reflective materials and stuff, or it looks very reflective, and it kind of gives a nice little pop. But the problem with that, realistically, what's happening is clothing doesn't reflect near as much as armor does. The plating definitely reflects more. So when we're trying to kind of paint a picture, and that's kind of what a miniature is supposed to be based on, is when you paint it, you're trying to paint the stilled picture of the miniature in action. And if you put reflectiveness, or you put a lot of highlights on your clothing, the same amount of highlights you put on your armor, you can't distinguish between the black armor and then the black clothing. It's very hard to do. Two, it's not very realistic because clothing doesn't reflect near as much as your armor does. And you'll see that I won't do any OSL work on this miniature at all. With the eyes, some people I could see doing that. I don't know why, because they don't actually glow. But mostly on like ID10 or something like that. When you're doing ID10, like his glass eye will reflect. If one, it didn't reflect in the game, so you shouldn't do it into your miniature. But two, the biggest important there is if you're putting a lot of reflectiveness material on your miniature, what that's telling the viewer is that there's a lot of light shining down on it, right? So if you're in a dark room and it's dark armor, you're still not going to have reflective, reflectiveness showing off your armor. And so what's important about that is, if you have a lot of reflective showing off your armor, and your base of your miniature is also very bright, like light grass and dirt, and looks like a very nice shiny sunny day, and then you have OSL work on it, it really just doesn't make sense, because the darker it is, the more OSL work you use, and the lighter it is, the less OSL work you'll use. So comparing reflective materials and OSL work, you have to really kind of use them as a contrast versus using them as a something you use together. And so in Iden's case here, because we're doing some heavy highlights on armor, we're going to actually dull out the highlights on the clothing right here. So I am going to put a mid-level highlight on everything that's clothing, and you'll see me go through the whole process here. But I am not going to put a top level highlight on her clothing, and just leave that top level highlight for her armor to kind of distinguish that reflectiveness. And you'll see exactly. What's nice about Iden is because she has low amount of colors, I can kind of show you the whole process without having it to be, a 3-hour video. So. Alright, so you guys have been watching for a while. Most of this stuff, I still treat this as a clothing. But I will put some top level highlights on that because it's kind of a little bit of both. But her boots is kind of the fun part, is the way she's standing, everything like that. You kind of and how light's going to reflect off that boot is going to be kind of fun to do. Now I will admit, I am still subtle in all my highlights. I'm not a very eccentric highlighter, which means my colors are all very similar. So when you look at a picture of it, you may not even see the highlights, but then when you look up the model up close, you'll definitely see them. That's how I like to paint things. If you want to be a little more eccentric, you can. But when I look at Iden in the game and everything, she never really glowed. It wasn't really a glowing feature she gave off, but it was a very reflective feature. So in certain situations, you'll have her, obviously a little bit more grayish or whitish than her black armor, but she was special ops too, so she wanted to make sure that she was hidden if necessary in dark rooms and stuff. So it's all part of it. You're trying to paint the picture of the miniature, as she's in battle basically, and that's kind of what we're trying to achieve here. This is probably the longest portion of your painting right here. Alright, so after that's done, we're going to actually go hit the mid-level highlight for the face. Because we did an Argrok shade, the skin's a lot darker than our mid-level highlight, the Cadian flesh tone. And so what you're going to have to do is blend. Normally in a whiter skin tone, you may not have to blend as much with the Cadian because it's so similar. But this Cadian really shows out, almost like a top-level highlight, and that's what I'm going to treat it as. And then I'm going to do the top level with the Cadian, even though it's called a mid-level highlight. It's technically a mid-level color. But I'm going to do the Cadian flesh tone here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend it, and using that blend almost as the undertone or the mid-level highlight. So you'll see exactly what I do here. So, but you want to make sure you get your cheekbones under the eyes. There's a little lip in the eye. Your eyelid is actually what that is. You don't want to get that because, in this situation, because it's kind of under the eye, and you kind of want to distinguish between the actual eyelids and the actual cheeks themselves, and you don't want to cover up those lines. But I'm trying to get this cheekbone. You'll get the top of her forehead. You'll get her nose. You'll get part of her chin, her lips, or her bottom lip, really. And that's about it, but then you'll go ahead and have to blend it all together. People always ask me how I do the eyes and face, and so I wanted to show this whole process. The important thing to note here, and I preach this so much, and if you've watched my other videos, you already know this, but 100% keep this paint thin. between her cheekbones, if you know, like by her nose, you have those creases and stuff. If you make that thick at all, you will cover up every single little line that her face brings, and then you'll kind of have this like blatant stated face, almost like she's on Botox looking face, you know, and that's not something we want to try to achieve here. We went in depth to our model. And just the bottom of the lip. You don't have to do the whole lip here. I think I am going to do most of it, but and then there's just kind of the bottom of her chin. As you can tell right now, it's not blended, and it would look pretty bad if I left it like this. So normally I don't blend the Cadian flesh tone with my Bugman's Glow and then a flesh tone because it's so close, and because I pretty much glaze it. It doesn't need blended, but this will 100% need blended. Yeah, so I'm just taking my Bugman's Glow and my Cadian Flesh Tone and just mixing it together on the palette, and then getting the color I achieve, and then kind of glaze it over onto those areas, basically between the base color and where that line breaks into the top level color. So I'm just going to break those lines and kind of just blend it in where a little bit of light would shine through, and make it to where she doesn't have like war paint on. So I'm just gonna go ahead and work through this process. tell how this face is coming around here. How it's already starting to blend. Now this left side I'm working on still. But the top of her forehead, you see how it's already starting to kind of blend in here. Real small strokes. You know, I usually say to people, if you mess up, you can always go back. I will say the face is the one area where you just want to take your time on, because if you do mess up the face, it is extremely hard to go back and get all the detail that you're wanting out from the beginning. So just be extremely careful about all that. Watching it this far, you know you know how long this process takes. I didn't do anything off camera here. This is pretty much all on camera, so this is exactly how long it takes. A lot of times it'll take longer than this. She's actually, you know, coming around pretty well, but a lot of times it takes a little bit longer than that, for sure. All right, we're gonna move on to the hair. Again, we're gonna go talk about subtlety here. When I was looking up pictures of Iden, I couldn't tell if her hair was black or if it was brown, like a dark brown. And so I wanted to incorporate that actually into my miniature itself. So I actually put a really dark brown highlight into her hair. And if you look at the picture, it almost looks black. But if you look at it up close or under certain lights, it's going to look brown. It might sound silly and it might sound petty. But honestly, I really like that. Kind of gives a nice little texture of reality there. But yeah, so you're going to have this dark highlight. You're pretty much going to do it on your top level areas. So the top of her head, top of her bun, and then stretching down a little bit of the sides here. Just that was a fun way of getting a little bit more realistic with her miniature. Alright, so we're going to move on to our top level highlights here. This is going to be a Dawn Stone. Again, this is going to be areas that are going to be metal or armor. So my gun's going to have this. Nice little highlight here. Show a little bit of wear, show a little bit of reflectiveness. That's how you can use the highlights in your guns, especially when you're not doing a TTM kind of style, which I don't tend to do with Star Wars Legion. And because she's pretty much all black, you kind of want to do stuff that'll kind of, you know, make things pop and make sure you see contrast in the miniature itself. Whether or not you see it in pictures, that's one thing, but you'll definitely see all this stuff on the board. So, you know, and that's the most important thing. When some of your buddies come over and you see, hey man, look at that miniature, and pick it up and they look at it and you see, man, you got a lot of detail built into this. That's probably the most rewarding thing when you're talking about good painted miniatures. So pictures are pictures, but when you see it in person, that's when you see all these details. Just getting the tips of all these gun pieces here, making sure you can see a little bit of wear, see a little bit of highlights. You can go more extreme with this. I actually don't take the white tips like I normally do on a gun, because she is very stealthy. I see her as kind of like I said, special ops, that's what she is. I want to do more of a matte versus a gloss NMM work, if that makes sense to you. So a matte gloss or a matte finish on a gun wouldn't be near as reflective, versus a glossy finish on a gun would be. So like with Stormtrooper stuff, I have more of a glossy non-metallic material technique where I put like a white tip on the edge of the top highlights to kind of give that glossy look. I chose a more of a matte gun look for her because of her special force. Talking top level highlights with armor, most of the time you're going to be doing like an edge highlight. You know, right now you see it kind of really under a lot of light, and so you're really seeing the distinguished lines between a top level and a mid level. But most of the time you're not going to see that, so I'm actually not going to blend this top level, but I'm just pretty much just edge highlighting, and that's really all you need when you're talking top level highlights for armor. Armor is something that is very sharp and edgy, and when it's very sharp and edgy, it reflects light off very drastically, and so it's not something that's subtle. And that's when you don't always have to blend with your top level highlights, because you want that very sharp look when light reflects off of it. Versus clothing, you're going to want to blend more because it's more of a gradual blend versus, like I said, versus armor. Now that I got all the armor done, I'm going to go on to the helmet highlights here. Again, I'm just going to edge highlight all this pretty much. Yep, so just real short lines, and you can always clean it back up, the lines up with your Ashen Gray to get those lines a little more clear. But the helmet is kind of a centerpiece in a lot of ways, so you really kind of want to make sure you get this right. Even when it's on the base, like what I'm doing, it's still definitely a centerpiece. People love looking at the helmets. Yep, so I'm just going to walk you through this, and we'll come back with another highlight. Alright, Dawnstone is all done. We're going to move on to our red highlight here. And if you notice, I'm not putting the red highlight on her clothing. I'm only going to put it on her helmet because this is the only where metal is hit with red. So the eyes, to kind of give it that nice little glow, I'm going to put it really kind of in the middle of the eye. So I'm going to run that red line, just a thin red line in the middle. It's going to look good. Alright, so this is the last step here. We're going to go ahead and take our top level highlight. We're just going to put like a little small line in the center here. But once you're done with this, you are completely done with Iden. So go ahead and glue it all on to your base or whatever. We thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, everything else. You know, this is something that we're going to be doing more of. We're going to be more and more tutorials, so stay tuned. And we thank you guys for watching.